Have you ever wondered why so many people describe turning 60 as a profound turning point, not just in age but in the very essence of their being? Carl Jung believed that the soul follows its own mysterious timeline, one that often waits decades before revealing its deepest truths. In our earlier years, life is filled with striving, building careers, raising families, chasing external success, but beneath all of that, the soul remains patient, silent, waiting. At 60, Jung said, something remarkable happens. The soul finally begins to speak. Its voice is quieter than ambition but deeper than desire. It calls us inward, toward reflection, authenticity, and meaning. This is not the decline of life, it is the awakening of a truer self. In this video, we explore Jung's wisdom on why the soul waits 60 years to reveal its message, and what that message means for you. Carl Jung often described human life as a journey divided into two great halves. The first half of life, he argued, is primarily about establishing ourselves in the external world, creating an identity, building stability, and striving toward recognition. In these decades, the human spirit is often consumed by the need to survive, to belong, and to achieve. From childhood into early adulthood, we are tasked with answering society's pressing questions. Who will you become? What will you achieve? Where will you fit? These questions shape much of our behavior and, for most, dominate the psyche well into middle age. We go to school, pursue a career, fall in love, build families, and gather possessions. All of this, according to Jung, is both natural and necessary. It is the work of the ego, the part of us that seeks to define a stable identity in the world. But while the ego builds and expands, the soul remains quiet. It does not interfere much in these years because its deeper truths would likely be ignored. Jung believed that the psyche is wise enough to wait until we are ready to hear its whispers. In the first half of life, we are not ready. Our energy is outward, focused on ambition, responsibility, and proving ourselves. If the soul were to speak then, its message might be drowned out by the noise of external pursuits. This does not mean the first half of life is meaningless. It is essential. Without achievement, stability, and experience, we would have no foundation for the later journey inward. Jung compared it to building a house. In the first half, we lay the bricks, put up the walls, and create structure. Only later do we enter the house fully to explore its inner rooms. Interestingly, many people experience a sense of restlessness in midlife, once the milestones of career or family are achieved. They may feel an emptiness that success alone cannot fill. Jung saw this not as failure but as a natural signal that the psyche is shifting from outward growth to inward depth. The soul, long silent, begins preparing to speak. Thus, the first half of life is about survival, achievement, and identity, but it is only one stage of a larger story. Its purpose is not simply to gather wealth or recognition, but to give us the strength and experience required for the second half of life, when the deeper questions arise. What does it mean to live authentically? Who am I beyond my roles? What is the meaning of my existence? In Jung's view, we cannot skip this stage. The outward journey comes first, but its fulfillment is not the end. It is the preparation for the soul's awakening. Carl Jung believed that human life is not a single straight line but a journey with distinct stages. If the first half of life is devoted to building an identity in the world, achieving success, raising families, and defining roles, then the second half of life is where the soul begins to reveal its deeper purpose. According to Jung, 60 is not an ending but a turning point. By the time a person reaches their 60s, many of the external roles that once consumed energy begin to lose their dominance. Careers may be winding down. Children may be grown and independent. Ambitions that once seemed urgent, status, wealth, recognition, no longer carry the same weight. For many, there is a surprising question that begins to stir within: if I am no longer defined by what I do for the world, who am I? This is the moment the soul has been waiting for. Jung suggested that the psyche is wise and patient. It does not force us toward deeper truths when we are not yet ready. In youth and middle age, the noise of striving is too loud for the soul's quiet voice. But at 60, when life naturally slows and distractions fall away, space opens for that voice to finally be heard. What emerges is not always easy. The soul may confront us with the shadow, parts of ourselves we denied, repressed, or avoided in earlier years. It may raise questions about meaning, mortality, and authenticity. This turning point is less about what we have achieved and more about what remains unfinished within us. For many, this can feel unsettling, even frightening. But for Jung, it is also the beginning of wisdom. At 60, the deeper self begins to emerge, offering a chance for true individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation means integrating all aspects of the psyche, not only the persona we showed to the world but also the hidden parts we neglected. It means recognizing that our value does not come only from what we produce, but from who we are in essence. This turning point transforms life from a pursuit of outer achievement to an exploration of inner meaning. Jung emphasized that it is not a decline but a second birth. The outward journey gave us tools, knowledge, and experience. Now, the inward journey asks us to use them in service of the soul. For some, this may mean embracing creativity that was suppressed in earlier years. For others, it could be seeking spiritual depth, healing old wounds, or offering wisdom to younger generations. But the central truth remains: at 60, we are invited to listen to the voice of the soul and to live more authentically than ever before. Thus, the turning point at 60 is not an ending. It is the threshold of a deeper beginning, where the quieter, truer self finally steps forward and speaks. Carl Jung often emphasized that the psyche is not in a rush. The soul does not push itself forward at every stage of life. Instead, it waits patiently, almost silently, while we become absorbed in the outward demands of existence. For Jung, this silence was not neglect, it was wisdom. The soul knows there is a time for striving and a time for awakening, and these two phases must come in their proper order. In the early and middle decades of life, our focus is directed outward. We are expected to build an identity, create stability, and carve out our place in the world. Ambition, responsibility, and social expectations occupy much of our energy. We work to establish careers, nurture families, build homes, and pursue dreams of recognition or success. These pursuits are not superficial, they are necessary. Jung described them as essential tasks of the ego, the conscious self that navigates society. If the soul were to speak too early, whispering questions about meaning, mortality, or inner truth, it would likely be ignored or dismissed. A young person, still consumed by the fire of ambition, would struggle to hear such messages. The ego at that stage is too strong, too busy building. The soul understands this, so it remains in silence, allowing us to play out the natural arc of human striving. This waiting is also compassionate. The soul does not interrupt the necessary illusions of youth, the belief that achievements or possessions will provide fulfillment. Instead, it lets us learn from experience. Only after decades of striving do many people come to see that external accomplishments, while important, are not the whole story. The soul waits for this realization, because only then will its voice be truly heard. Jung compared this process to planting seeds. In youth, we plant in the soil of ambition. We grow outward, reaching toward light, striving for recognition. But the roots, the soul, remain hidden. They deepen quietly, out of sight, preparing for a time when outward growth slows and inward depth becomes possible. The soul's silence is not absence, it is preparation. By the time a person reaches the later stages of life, the distractions of ambition often soften. Careers decline in importance, children may be independent, and the relentless push for more begins to lose its urgency. In this quieter space, the soul begins to stir. Its silence breaks, and it starts to reveal a new direction, one not defined by external success but by authenticity, integration, and meaning. This is why Jung saw the later years not as decline but as transformation. The silence of the soul in earlier life is the necessary groundwork for its voice in the second half. Only when we have lived out our worldly ambitions can we be ready to face the deeper truths of existence. In this way, the soul's silence is not emptiness, it is patience, waiting for the moment when we are truly ready to listen. Carl Jung described the human journey as a process of evolution, not only physical but also psychological and spiritual. The first half of life, as he saw it, is devoted to building, constructing an identity, securing material stability, raising families, and pursuing outward ambitions. Yet, Jung believed the psyche holds more than just this outward story. Hidden beneath the surface is another, deeper current, the soul. And at around 60, this current rises. The soul begins to speak. Unlike the demands of youth, ambition, success, recognition, the voice of the soul does not shout. It whispers, urging us not toward outward expansion but inward reflection. Its language is not one of achievement but of meaning. It asks questions that ambition cannot answer. What has your life truly meant? What lessons have you learned? What parts of yourself have you ignored? What remains unfinished within you? This awakening voice can feel disorienting at first. After decades of measuring life by accomplishments, suddenly the criteria shift. What matters is no longer the trophies collected or the roles fulfilled. What matters is authenticity, integration, and depth. For many, this transition feels like a second birth. The person you were before, defined by career, family, reputation, begins to give way to the person you truly are inside. At 60, the soul often calls us to reflect on the shadow, the parts of ourselves we pushed aside in earlier years. Perhaps it is a creative impulse that was ignored for practicality, or emotions we buried in order to stay strong for others, or a longing for spirituality that was postponed while life demanded action. The awakening voice insists that these neglected parts must be heard, integrated, and honored. Only then can wholeness emerge. Jung emphasized that this stage of life is not decline, but transformation. Where ambition once dominated, reflection now guides. Where survival once dictated choices, truth now becomes the compass. The awakening voice challenges us to live with greater honesty, to shed the masks we wore for decades and to finally embody the essence of our being. For some, this might mean stepping into roles of wisdom and mentorship, offering guidance to younger generations. For others, it may be a quiet return to creativity, spirituality, or love of nature. Whatever form it takes, the shift is unmistakable. The soul seeks not more possessions, but more presence. Not more recognition, but more authenticity. This awakening also reshapes our relationship with mortality. At 60, we begin to feel the finiteness of life more vividly. But rather than fear, the soul often brings clarity. Life's brevity becomes a reason to live more truthfully, to value depth over speed, and to embrace each day as an opportunity to align with what is most real within us. Thus, the awakening voice is not a burden, it is a gift. It is the soul finally speaking after a lifetime of waiting, inviting us into a deeper chapter where meaning, reflection, and inner truth become the guideposts for the journey ahead. Carl Jung believed that one of the most profound transformations in human life happens when we begin to move from ego to essence. The ego, in Jungian psychology, is the conscious self, the identity we build in response to the outer world. It asks questions like, who am I in society? What role do I play? What do others see me as? For most of the first half of life, this question dominates. We define ourselves through roles: student, professional, parent, partner, provider. We pursue success, approval, and security. These outward markers help us form a sense of stability, but Jung warned that the ego is not the whole self. It is only the surface. The deeper self, the essence, remains hidden until later in life. Unlike the ego, essence does not measure worth by external validation. It does not care about titles, possessions, or reputation. Instead, it asks a quieter but more enduring question: who am I, truly, beyond roles and appearances? Around the turning point of midlife and beyond, often around 60, many people experience a shift in perspective. The things that once seemed essential, career milestones, social status, even personal image, begin to lose their power. Instead, a longing emerges for authenticity, meaning, and wholeness. This is the soul's invitation to move from ego to essence. This shift is not always easy. For some, it can feel like a crisis. If I am no longer defined by my work, achievements, or family role, then who am I? Jung saw this as a necessary step, not a loss. The crumbling of ego identity is the doorway to discovering the deeper self. In this stage, reflection becomes more important than ambition. We begin to ask, what have I learned from my struggles? Which parts of myself have I hidden? How can I live in greater alignment with truth? Instead of chasing external validation, the focus turns inward, toward integration of the shadow, healing of old wounds, and embracing of unlived potential. Living from essence means living authentically. It is no longer about playing roles to meet expectations, it is about embodying the fullness of who we are. It often brings a sense of calm, grounding, and inner freedom. Instead of striving to be someone in the world, we learn to simply be ourselves in the deepest sense. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. It is the path of moving from ego to essence, from image to truth, from outer achievement to inner authenticity. And it is in this shift that the soul's real wisdom begins to unfold. Carl Jung believed that one of the most essential tasks of later life is the integration of the shadow. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the hidden side of our personality, the qualities, impulses, and desires that we deny, repress, or find unacceptable. These parts of ourselves do not disappear simply because we push them away. Instead, they remain in the unconscious, shaping our behaviors, choices, and relationships from the shadows. In the first half of life, most people avoid their shadow. Society rewards conformity, achievement, and external roles, so we often suppress whatever doesn't fit that image. Anger, vulnerability, desire, creativity, or even sensitivity may be buried because they seem inconvenient or unsafe. But what is repressed does not vanish, it waits. And in the later years, when the external distractions of ambition and responsibility begin to fade, the soul calls us to finally face these hidden parts. This confrontation is not meant to punish, but to heal. Jung believed that without acknowledging the shadow, we can never truly become whole. If we remain identified only with our light, the traits we consciously accept, we live only half a life. Wholeness requires embracing the full spectrum of who we are. For many, the later years naturally bring opportunities to meet the shadow. Life slows down, reflection deepens, and unresolved emotions resurface. Old wounds, regrets, and unexpressed desires may rise to consciousness. While this can feel uncomfortable, Jung saw it as a vital invitation. The psyche is urging us to integrate, not ignore. Integration means neither indulging nor denying the shadow, but understanding it, accepting it, and finding balance. For example, someone who spent their life avoiding conflict may discover the healthy strength of their anger. Someone who always suppressed creativity for practical reasons may finally allow their artistic side to emerge. Someone who denied vulnerability may begin to embrace tenderness and connection. By integrating the shadow, the later years become not a decline but a deepening. Instead of being haunted by what we avoided, we reclaim lost parts of ourselves. This process leads to greater authenticity, compassion, and wisdom. For Jung, the goal of life was individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. Integration of the shadow is a central step in that journey. At 60 and beyond, the soul invites us to look inward, embrace what we once feared, and discover the freedom that comes from living as our complete, authentic selves. Carl Jung believed that the second half of life brings with it a profound shift in purpose. In our younger years, much of life is defined by striving, building careers, raising families, seeking stability, and carving out an identity in the world. These outward achievements are important, but Jung taught that they are not the end of the story. When we enter the later years, a different call begins to emerge, the call to live authentically, in alignment with the soul. Authenticity, in Jung's understanding, is not about perfection or fitting into ideals. It is about truth. It means stripping away the masks we wear for society, the roles we perform to meet expectations, and the illusions we carried about what makes us valuable. In their place, we discover a deeper alignment with who we truly are, not as the world defines us, but as the soul reveals us. By 60, many of life's outer roles begin to lose their grip. Careers may wind down, children become independent, and the relentless pursuit of success feels less urgent. What once seemed vital no longer carries the same weight. This loosening creates space for reflection, and with reflection comes the realization that authenticity matters more than achievement. Living authentically requires courage. It asks us to face the shadow we've denied, acknowledge the wounds we've carried, and reclaim the passions we may have set aside. For some, this may mean embracing creativity or spirituality that was suppressed in earlier years. For others, it could mean speaking truths long silenced, or learning to live more gently, more slowly, more meaningfully. When we live in alignment with the soul, life begins to feel lighter yet deeper. We are no longer driven by the need to prove ourselves or to measure up. Instead, we act from a place of inner integrity. Relationships become more genuine, values become clearer, and a sense of inner freedom takes root. Jung saw this movement toward authenticity as essential to individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. The later years are not a decline but an invitation to live without pretense. The masks can finally fall away. What remains is not the image we projected, but the essence of who we are. The call to authenticity is, in truth, the soul's greatest gift. It reminds us that the purpose of life is not simply to achieve, but to awaken, to live in harmony with the deepest truth of our being. Culturally, aging is often framed as a decline, a gradual fading of vitality, opportunity, and purpose. But Carl Jung offered a radically different vision. For him, later life was not an ending, but a transformation. Reaching 60 was not about diminishing potential, but about unlocking a new phase of growth, one defined by wisdom, freedom, and authenticity. The first half of life, Jung explained, is driven by external responsibilities, career, family, survival, and identity building. These years are filled with striving, proving, and performing. But by 60, much of that struggle begins to soften. The soul, long patient, finally has space to speak. And when it does, it calls us not to more ambition, but to deeper truth. This is the gift of later life, the freedom to step out of roles that once confined us and to live closer to who we truly are. No longer bound as tightly by external validation, we begin to see what really matters: peace, presence, and meaning. Many people describe this stage as liberating. With fewer illusions to maintain, life feels simpler, more authentic, and more deeply satisfying. Wisdom is another gift that emerges. The struggles, losses, and joys of earlier decades are not wasted, they are transformed into understanding. Experience ripens into perspective, and perspective becomes a source of guidance, not only for ourselves but also for others. Jung saw this as the natural flowering of the psyche, to become a bearer of wisdom for the community, a living bridge between the past and the future. Most importantly, later life offers the chance to embody the truest self. When the ego loosens its grip and the shadow is integrated, the essence of who we are begins to shine. This is not about perfection, but wholeness. It is about embracing every part of our story and finding freedom in authenticity. Thus, 60 is not the beginning of decline but the threshold of a new chapter, one where the soul takes the lead. In this stage, life is no longer about becoming someone else. It is about finally becoming who you were always meant to be. If Jung's vision of later life as a new beginning resonates with you, take this as your invitation. 60 and beyond is not an ending, it's a doorway to wisdom, freedom, and authenticity. The soul has waited patiently to speak, and now it's your time to listen, embrace the shadow, honor your truth, and step into the wholeness you were always meant to live. If you found this meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights on Carl Jung, psychology, and the deeper journey of the soul.